We're here on a Thursday, less than 24 hours after a pretty chaotic day in the state of Nebraska. Um, DB, how you feeling this morning?
Um, I'm it was a long day yesterday.
It sure was.
So I mean, it's obviously tough. You got it's a couple of different aspects to it, right?
Hmm.
There's the friend,
Yeah.
right? Like then there's the man. I love my university. Like, what's best? Can I separate those two? Do I have to separate those two?
Hmm.
And then it's like I have to practice, sure enough, what I said yesterday, right? Because I said I'm not typically a guy that um, looks at potential what could be's and what ifs and on a negative slant
Hmm.
where I allow that to dictate my thought process.
Hmm.
It was really hard yesterday not to fast forward to um, potentials down the road
Yeah.
with the landscape, not only for the University of Nebraska, but for the athletic department. So I ran the gamut of emotions, and I told Trev last night. I said, I'm not mad.
Hmm.
Like that wasn't the first feeling, and I still don't. I'm not mad at it. What I think I am is I'm pretty disappointed, but I'm disappointed across the board. And listen, 888-638-4876. Um, we can process through it
There's
and
a lot of places to point the finger.
yeah, 100%. But before it's hard to go get a pound of flesh if you're pound of fleshy
Hmm.
without knowing all the details. And I don't think any of us really do.
Yeah, we
Right?
don't. We don't.
Right. I think um, I think this started, early Tuesday, Wednesday,
Hmm.
around there early last week, and I think there were one or two people that knew.
Okay.
Um, I think Trev was asked not to go to College Station on Saturday. Uh,
By leadership.
yes,
Okay.
and I think he went anyway. Which, I mean, uh,
That's his discretion.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
I don't really begrudge him for that. Um, and then bad news, per usual, will beat you home,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
Houston Chronicle gets it, and then we're off and running.
So let's kind of go back through the timeline yesterday because uh, you obviously talked to Trev last night at some point.
Via text, yes.
Okay. So, and you can share as little or as much of that conversation as you want. I obviously don't
It'll
want.
be very little.
That's totally fair. Um, the the timeline yesterday is about 9 a.m. Little after while we're on the air talking to Jacob, but
We're in the middle of an interview.
yeah, talking to Jacob Padilla. The news comes down from Houston Chronicle that the Texas A&M's targeting Trev Alberts and that he's expected to take the job.
Mhm.
Nothing final at that point. It was, not a done deal, but that the expectation was there. And then we have about 6 hours, 5.5, 6 hours, where we don't hear much of anything. And the longer it drags on, you kind of start to think, well, maybe there's a little more wiggle room here for Nebraska than we originally thought.
Yeah, I felt like during that 5 or 6 hours, because I have a decent idea of what was going on, right? Kind of the posturing,
Between leadership and Trev.
yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we'll just say leadership.
I
Um,
mean, do we want to get more specific?
no,
Okay.
no. Um, but I think it was for a few people. The and I got to do this in order, not just talk to be talking. But I think Trev wanted some assurances,
Okay.
um, and I think they were willing to bring that to the table because I still don't think Trev wanted to leave.
Do you
I think he feels like he has to.
Sure, and that's kind of there's a couple different scenarios where this could have played out, and I do want to get to those. So you're saying a few different people. When I say leadership, I mean Board of Regents interim president.
Nope.
Okay.
That's part of the problem.
Okay.
Because
that's why I wanted to clarify.
This is kind of speculation.
Sure.
But I'm not. There were several Board of Regents that weren't even in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do think there were one or two that were.
Okay.
That knew as maybe early as the middle of last week
mm-hmm.
that something was on the horizon. I do think Chris knew.
Okay.
Kaborik. That
the interim
this
president.
Yeah, that this was a thing potentially early last week.
Okay.
Now, what was disclosed, I have no idea.
Sure.
But I was surprised it got to Saturday.
Mm.
But all day, like during those 6 hours or however long, I felt better by the hour.
Mm-hmm. And then by about 3, things started to come out where people all of a sudden felt pretty good about him staying. And not just you and me who had talked sort of privately, but a lot of people around that same time frame had started.
And I think people that operate in the know.
Yeah. I think people that are reasonably well.
I mean, I'm not asking the guy down at or gal at,
Quick Trip or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, no disrespect to Quick Trip, but I
they may be more plugged in than I realized. Who knows, right? But yeah, the people that I would consider to be knowledgeable about these situations, people that have been knowledgeable about these situations for me in the past.
And I think people in the athletic department felt the same way. There was a window where I think, all right.
It's from about 3 to 5.
Yeah.
Is when people thought he was staying.
I would say about 2 to 4.
Okay. So it got to me about 3 to 5. So it was a little earlier than when it actually was happening,
because I think,
which is fair.
Because I think the email came around.
It was just before 5, I think.
4:40 maybe.
Yeah. So about 2 to 4 internally, about 3 to 5
because
externally.
I know I was on my way to parent-teacher conferences.
Yes.
So I was heading to the middle school first, and it was a couple of expletives. Couldn't get it done. He's leaving.
Mm.
And then then the department must have got the email.
Yeah.
Because then it just
was widespread.
It was just chaos.
So that's the timeline yesterday. The period in real question here, I think there's 2 periods in question. A, how did we get to the point where he felt it was necessary to go to College Station? Right? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what happened in the 6 hours between initial report, we'll call it the 8 hours, between initial report and him leaving? Because a lot happened in that time period, I think, that we don't totally have the answers to yet. As you said, you think Trev was asking for some assurances?
Yeah, I think he talked to some very, very influential folks.
Okay.
That weren't part of the Board of Regents. I feel pretty good about that. So
I have heard a name that I was told he was meeting with that is not part of the Board of Regents. That's very influential.
And so I think there's a couple of 2 or 3 things. It just depends on whose perspective. Everybody wants to know the why. I'm not sure we'll ever really get it.
I don't know that we will either.
But I was encouraged because I felt what Trev was trying to do was leverage. I felt like he was trying to put Nebraska, the athletic department, and the academics in a better position so they could do their job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think he wanted people to do what he was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Cast a vision, kind of model the behavior, execute the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because that's really who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So when he sat down and he had the interview and he talked about, we need to find a president. I think we ought to do that. Like his delivery there, I think we ought to.
Yeah.
I think we ought to go ahead and do that. Let you know that he's frustrated.
Sure.
Right. And I think some guys, short side option, and some other guys that I follow on social media were bringing it back to that segment. And now everybody is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I still think it was a little more than that as well. Because we don't really know.
More than just wanting to hire a president.
Yeah.
Wanting to get a president hired.
Yeah. Like I believe that.
That you think it's significantly more than just that.
I think that was just part of it,
Yeah, sure.
right? Because a lot of people, I'm not mad at the timeline.
Yeah, I actually don't think that not having a president
Yeah.
is that big of a deal.
So I'm not.
These
I'm not stuck on that. I think
those
it was a factor.
those searches often take a pretty long time.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it
I
was
think of big universities. I mean, 7 months isn't ludicrous.
I think it was 7 months between when President Carter took over the job.
Yeah.
I think it was about that same time frame.
It's happened before.
We've seen other places take out, I was people in my Twitter mentioned some were pretty informational. We've seen other places take 9 months.
Yeah.
Like it's not a super unusual time frame.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I have no idea what you guys, but I would
Yeah.
agree with that. Just being a Berean.
I think Ohio State was the other example, was that where Ted Carter went. I think that place was open, if I'm remembering right. So it's not a super unusual, but you're saying you think the president job not being filled was kind of a microcosm of organizational dysfunction that he felt.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to put it?
I would say that. Let's say it's a third,
Okay.
maybe 40%.
Yeah.
Because I think when you start to take a lot of things that have happened and you deduce it to one thing, you try to pinpoint its focal point. So it's like,
You're trying to find the core of the issue.
You're
right?
like, okay, I keep having X amount of issues. This happened, then
Mhm.
this happened, then this happened, and we told me this, and I just would like this,
Mhm.
right? Because he inherited a project that he didn't start.
Mhm.
Had to kind of see that through. He cleaned up a lot. He cleaned up a lot of messes early.
Mhm.
So I just get the sense sometimes, like, it's not necessarily paying it forward, but you want to make sure that people have your back.
Mhm.
And so I think it manifests itself in a ton of ways. Sometimes it's, hey, you got to match my energy. I want you to match my transparency. I want you to, because sometimes when you work for and with people, that's really all you want.
Mhm. Yeah. You want them to match your level of investment,
Commitment.
your level of commitment, your level of,
And those are typically the people we like to work for, right?
Yes.
Like, that won't ask you to do anything that they're not
are not willing to do. 100%.
So I think that's stuck in his craw for a while.
Sure.
I
also think, and tell me if I'm way off base here, right? Because I do think
I may not know.
we have, and that's fair. I do think we have to address the Board of Regents elephant in the room at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that's down the road a little bit, but I'll say this, and I'll say it early.
Okay.
Does the efficiency and the political side of the Board of Regents need to get better? 100%, because they're trending in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the sole catalyst for what I think is going on here? I'm not so sure.
Okay.
I'm not so sure. Now, that's not to say, Trev may have looked at it and said, well, this isn't going to get any better.
Right.
Even though there may not be as direct correlation, because I do think a member or two of the Board of Regents was aware,
mm-hmm.
without really informing the rest of the Board of Regents or having that discussion. So I think that's a problem.
Yeah, they probably need to have that discussion.
Now, is that part of the dysfunction that I think he's dejected about? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Is it directly related to all these other issues?
Here's why I
because what I say, and I mean this.
Sure.
Right? Like, there's this. So the friend in me says, I don't know how long I could continue to, if I didn't like the direction that something was moving in,
mm-hmm.
or leadership, or I didn't have a ton of faith
mm-hmm.
in leadership. Okay, I understand. I don't know how much you would endure. I would ask you to endure, my friend.
Yeah.
But where I struggled yesterday was, sometimes I think I just want people to put their hands up and fight. Like, so this is the duality of my competitiveness and kind of how I feel about people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take it. Like, rise above.
Stand up and fight it.
If you really love this institution,
mm-hmm.
and it means as much to you as you say, I'm not sure I want to play the blame game with the Board of Regents. Just fight.
So here's
Does that make sense?
100%
But if you were like if you were gonna ask me advice
as a friend.
yeah, I would say, man, I don't know, Ravi.
It's a bad work
it's
environment.
a bad work
Yeah.
environment. Maybe you got to find something to do because what I think this is going to do, like if you're looking for a glass half full, is I really think you're going to have to revisit the political protocol and the infrastructure and how it operates. Like
So
you have to take a good hard look at it.
That's kind of what I wanted to get at a little bit here, because I honestly don't care what your political leanings are. That's not what this is about. What this is about is politics having crept into a place where it probably does not belong. Because I was reading articles last night from like the Nebraska Examiner about
They will do a good job. So Flatwater Press and the Examiner,
Flatwater Free Press.
I don't know if they can get people to like talk, but they'll probe.
So
They'll probe.
I'm reading this article about a Board of Regents seat in 2022 that became highly politicized, where the outgoing governor was supporting one person, the incoming governor was supporting another person, and it was strictly because of their political leanings. And
You're talking about in reference to the article.
yes, this is what was referenced in the article during it was the race between Williams and Wilmot. And so Williams was from like Gothenburg, Wilmot's from Beaver City, I think. And this was basically what happened in this race. And one of the things that Wilmot was running on, allegedly, this was attributed to her, and she tried to kind of back off of it a little bit, was the fact that they thought they needed to get rid of Ronnie Green and Ted Carter. That was the motivation attributed to her stance. Okay. And didn't really come out and deny it. Was like, well, I think we should evaluate whatever.
And listen, let me just say this real
Sure.
quick. I get the optics, but remember, optics are the word we use when we don't have enough information.
Sure.
I get the optics of Carter, Green, and Alberts all leaving, and we talk about good people. I'm not so sure all three of those people are uniquely connected from a positive aspect, right? I don't know the relationship between Ted Carter, Ronnie Green, and Trev Alberts. I only know the relationship between Trev Alberts and Ted Carter. So I know Ronnie Green gets lumped in there, but I'm not one of those people that's saying these three things are connected.
Totally.
So I that's my stance on that triumvirate.
Totally fair. I'm only putting him in there because
I understand. I wanted to say that for me.
Sure. I'm including him because he was in the article in terms of some of the Board of Regents wanting to pursue new leadership as part of their agenda. The problem that I have with that situation is the terms liberal and conservative were attributed to education. And once you start talking about education in those terms, you've already lost.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And the problem is people panic because of the tuition numbers, like the debt, the student enrollment, like what's gone on since COVID. Like everybody's anxiety is ramped up, and it typically rolls downhill. So I think people's sensitivity is heightened. Like what we're willing to talk about, what we're willing to put up with, it's heightened. And so for Trev yesterday, the one thing I feel pretty comfortable about is I don't feel like, I know this isn't a money thing, and I think he's well aware of the volatility of their athletic director position, and that it's not Board of Regents there, it's boosters.
Yep. Fair.
I think he's well aware of that. But what does he typically gravitate towards?
Vision and leadership.
The exact two words I was gonna use.
And
when you read his announcement,
yeah,
that's what he's hanging his hat on. Now, will it be short lived? I don't know, but I do feel he's in such a place emotionally that's what he'll I was going to say ran to, but I'm not trying to give the impression that
That's
that's
what he
what
gravitates
that's what he's
towards.
drawn
Yeah.
towards.
I
Because I again, the one thing I think I feel good about
Mhm.
is I thought yesterday's meetings, for the most part,
mhm.
were about putting Nebraska in a better position across the board.
Moving forward.
I don't think it was to elevate. I don't know. Yes, was it a power play? Sure. Was it a game of chicken? Not so much. I
It
think
was-
there's some things that he wanted.
He was trying to leverage a situation to try and accomplish the vision that he had.
Yes,
Is that fair?
I would, yeah.
So, and obviously there was enough friction there that he felt like he couldn't get that done.
Yeah, see, I wish I knew what happened kind of down the stretch.
Yeah. In the last couple hours there. That like 2 to 4 period.
and
really
and
critical.
you know, it may take some time, but
Yeah.
And again, there's some media outlets out there that can get people to, they're really good at what they do,
Getting people to talk.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Here's what I do know is people are going to be paying, whether it's these people's fault or not, people are going to be paying a lot more to the Board of Regents election in 8 months.
yeah,
than they did last time.
and we got to take some ownership, man.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why I'm not. You know me, man. It's like the people that talk about bad kids.
Mhm.
Well, it starts with parenting too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be upset about the Board of Regents, but who does the electing?
I was going to say it's an elected position.
Like we do.
It's an elected position. And how many of you actually know who you're voting for?
So I'm not.
If you vote for Board of Regents,
That's not where my angst.
I do think it is a problem.
And listen, I'm not gonna fight you over that.
We've got more.
Yeah.
I do want to get to Trev's statement. I'll set up the lineup at some point. We do have guests. I don't know. We'll talk. We've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.